This is Lexington Green Television, the show about small business, free enterprise, and independent voting rights. Now, here is your host, Robert Marcoccio.
Hi, I'm Robert Marcoccio, President and founder of the No Affiliation Alliance, which is the independent voters activist group for no affiliation independent voters. Tonight we're going to talk about what I feel is probably one of the greatest national security risk that the United States and American citizens have to face. And it's probably one of the least recognized from the mainstream media. The subject is about North American Free Trade Agreement and the introduction of the Transpacific Partnership, which, if I'm correct, Singapore is a day ahead of us, so it's actually being negotiated right now and will be for the rest of the week. The Transpacific Partnership, like the NAFTA, is a free trade agreement that is being negotiated between the United States, Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. And so with all three principles of the NAFTA agreement being involved in this negotiation, we have to assume that this is not a separate free trade agreement, but that it is actually an expansion of the NAFTA agreement. One of the things is with the NAFTA agreement last week, the president had awarded a contract to Brazil to manufacture the American military airplanes, the small cargo ships and things, as part of an incentive to entice Brazil to join in the negotiation. This has already cost another 1,500 American jobs, and the agreement, well, it's been getting negotiated for a number of years now. This is actually the 16th meeting. And according to the Congressional Research Service, U.S. negotiators and others envision the Trans-Pacific Partnership as a comprehensive and high-standard free trade agreement, presumably because the president hopes that this agreement will liberalize the trade in nearly all goods and services and include commitments that go beyond the currently established requirements regulated by the World Trade Organization. Now, there are significant differences in the terminologies that I want to clarify between what is free enterprise versus what is free market versus what is free trade. The free enterprise system is what our whole entire economic system was founded upon. This is the ability of an individual to be able to go out and start a business or a job, or choose the occupation or trade, use whatever education opportunities that they may have to create their own lifestyle. If you're working for somebody and you don't think that you're making enough money, you have the ability to go out, get loans, borrow money from friends or family, or sell off some property, or work a job, save up enough money to someday be able to open up your own storefront and be able to work at your capacity at a much better pay rate than you would get working for somebody else. That supposedly is the American dream in this country. The other term of free market, a free market is supposedly where all of the participants have an equality of opportunity, but the inability of a perfect playing field between the competitors is very difficult because you have a difference in regulations, with environmental regulations, a difference with pay scales. So when they created the NAFTA agreement, they were intending to create this level playing field where everybody was paying the same prices for their labor, the same amount for their same regulations, environmental regulations, same labor laws. And this is something that has never been able to happen since the NAFTA agreement was enforced. So the Americans have been put on an imbalance as far as trade goes. Now, as far as the international exchange of commodities goes, it might be fair as far as, well, the companies in Mexico are also owned by the companies here in America, and vice versa, and same with Canada. But the workforce is what's suffering, the people who actually work for these companies. Because what we're seeing is that because of the imbalance of the pay scale and the fringes, and the fact that most of the Mexican nations are nationalistic in their economies, what we find is that we're at a disadvantage because American corporations have the ability to go down there and make these contracts directly with these foreign governments. Now, the third terminology is the free trade. Now, free trade is a duty-free system. This is what the NAFTA agreement was intended to do. It was to remove the barriers such as tariffs, subsidies, regulations, and make the competitors be able to move their products across international borders without government interference. There's no way for government not to interfere, because you have to inspect those trucks that are coming over our borders, because there's more than just parts and finished products coming across those borders. There's illegal immigrants coming from all over the world, not just from Mexico. You have the threat from terrorism, things being brought into this country illegally. You have a lot of knockoff trade infringement items coming in from places overseas, China, Korea. Many of these organizations that are using the NAFTA agreement to avoid having to go through American customs, because the American custom is pretty lax on the Mexican transports coming through the United States, where if China was sending imports to California, there would be a little bit more intensity in the inspection process. So they can bring just about anything into this country and bring it through either Canada or bring it through Mexico, and supposedly this is supposed to be good for American industries here. The problem that has been experienced is that where in Canada they might be making parts, and in Mexico they're making parts, and for the parts that are being made in Canada to be assembled in Mexico, they're coming across the United States. They're being assembled in Mexico, and then they're being sent right back over to Canada to be packaged and then redistributed here in the United States for retail. The problem with that is that if we don't have jobs, we're not a very good consumer base. And the rest of the world is starting to find this out. And when you listen to these public relations companies that are beefing up the Transpacific Partnership, and they put these spins on these agreements so that they appear to be the holy grail for the global economy, unfortunately, the government's involvement through micromanagement with regulation interferes with the exchange of commodities. And the only entity that actually benefits are the government, the international corporations, and the banks. In particular, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund that regulates the index of currency on the international exchange. One of the things that that is not being reported by the media is that the only members of NAFTA that are actually happy with NAFTA are the corporations and the nationalist governments, and of course, well, the American government, and the people, the workers, are not happy. Mexico is not happy about NAFTA. They want out of NAFTA. Canada has its grievances, especially the citizens of Canada have their grievances against NAFTA. And the Americans here in the United States, especially the American corporations that are still considered as domestic, they're not happy with NAFTA either. So if all these people are griping about NAFTA, why is it still being maintained? And the answer to that is the bottom line of profit. It's good for government, it's good for the big businesses, and it's good for the banking. I'm hoping to have some callers call in and ask some questions about NAFTA and give us a little bit of input. So if you want to call in, I guess Cliff will put the number up, and you can join in on the conversation. When the problem with these free trade agreements is that when the government becomes reliant on the income that is coming out of these agreements through the international trade between the countries, and the bottom line of profit becomes their focusing point on the decisions of foreign trade and domestic issues, it becomes a two-headed coin in favor of the international companies, because first they have the ability to break down the antitrust laws that protect the small businesses here in the United States. The second advantage is that they have the ability to be able to lobby in our Congress for laws that would be detrimental to domestic industries here in the United States, because even the American corporations, the big corporations, General Electric, Apple, Black & Decker, let me think, some of the other, but these corporations used to protect American interests before the NAFTA agreement was made. Because if there was a law being made by the United Nations or the European Union that was trying to be imposed against American industry, these companies had the hold on the United States Congress, because these are the constituents of the United States Congress. International trade corporations are the ones who fund the government, who are the ones who pay for all of the campaigns. And that's true with either party, the Democrats or the Republican parties. So now that these trade organizations, now that these international organizations have the ability to be able to make contracts directly with these foreign international entities, which are in fact representatives of those foreign governments, because they are national economies, which means they do not recognize privately owned property. They have nothing to lose by negotiating an agreement with their foreign partner, come back here into the United States of America and negotiate with the governors and the United States Congress and with the state assemblies to change laws statewide and locally that would accommodate their new business ventures that are to the benefit of these nationalist governments. And antitrust laws, they changed the zoning laws, they've changed the tax regulations, they've changed labor laws, they've changed just about every regulation, even laws that protect them against the bankruptcy filings. They have a predatorial agenda of wiping out the small businesses by ensuring that the communities, the local governments and the county governments and the state governments create legislations that are in fact obstructions to the free enterprise system. The goal of NAFTA was to eliminate the barriers of trade and investment between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. But some of these barriers are actually was the elimination of constitutional clauses that were very important to the people. There's one in Mexico, Article 27 of the Mexico Constitution was, I guess, eliminated, was because the negotiators of the NAFTA agreement felt that it was a barrier and was impeding their ability to be able to invest. And what this did was it incited groups, mostly left-wing groups, that on the first day that NAFTA was initiated had actually declared war on their governments and have overthrown those governments since the beginning of the NAFTA agreement. And so the NAFTA agreement has had consequences to it right from the very beginning. And what were considered as being nations that were not offensive to the American system of government are now systems of government that are counter to the American system of government. So this causes a national security risk right at our borders. It also had undermined the American Constitution, because Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution is an exclusionary clause that disallows a governor or a member of the state Congress to be able to negotiate a treaty agreement with a foreign nation or a foreign a business. Because, and like I said before, under a nationalist economy, any entity of business is owned by the government, and the managers are just that. They're just managers. It's not a corporation in Mexico is not the same as a corporation here in the United States of America. A corporation in Mexico, or in Europe for that matter, is owned by the government, is run by the government. The managers are given bonuses and are given a salary, and that's the extent of their involvement. Here in America, a owner of a corporation has the ability, retains much of the profit. He basically incorporates for the protection that is given to him from any kind of a lawsuit. If you have 1,000 or 2,000 employees, if they decide to dump toxic waste into a river, you're still responsible for it. Well, a corporation has the protection to that their personal assets are separate from the corporation, so they can only be sued for whatever the corporation owns. Now, how Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution has been compromised is that now we see, for instance, here in the state of Pennsylvania, we see Governor Corbett making an agreement with a British company to take over the Pennsylvania lottery, and his justification is that it will bring in money for Social Security for those who are on retirement. But at the same time, it's a violation of the United States Constitution, and we can't set aside the United States Constitution anytime that we have a great idea. That's not how the law is set up in this country, because you may have a great idea, but what happens if it doesn't work? What happens if something that along the line, something gets changed or something fails, like the No Child Left Behind, or what we're starting to experience now with the Obama health care tax. We don't know where it's going to go, but we're stuck with it. And once it's legislated into law, it's that much harder for us to get rid of it, because now it falls into the political arena, and the bureaucrats are going to protect what they consider as being their the wants of their constituents. But what Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution had done was it had set up a separation between American enterprise and foreign enterprise. And the founding fathers of our country, the people who wrote our Constitution, felt that this was something that was necessary. And the reason they felt it was necessary is because if you allow a private enterprise to go abroad and deal directly with a government, they have ways of manipulating people through terrorism, through bribery. If they catch them or they set them up to do something that was illegal, they can get these Americans to come back here in the country and do things that would normally be something in contradiction to their character. But under certain circumstances, they can make somebody do what they want them to do. Well, to protect the people of the United States and the government of the United States, they disallowed this to happen. And they also took away the ability of a governor to be able to make a treaty agreement with a foreign nation, because then they would be making treaty agreements with other nations, and the next thing you know, you would have a Russian or a German or a French military post in a state, and now they are occupying American territory. And this is one of the reasons why the NAFTA agreement has become a national security risk, because it has removed this checking mechanism that has maintained the sovereignty of our domestic industries here in the United States. Because now if an international corporation goes into partnership with a foreign entity, and that foreign government convinces the owners or the CEOs or the board members of that national branch to lobby here in the United States government, in our Congress, to make laws that would be detrimental to our domestic industries. The only thing that the international American corporations would lose would be their market here in the United States of America as far as the manufacturing goes. But if it increases, if they run an American business out of business, what results is that now there's more of a market for more product in their overseas branches. So an American corporation is not losing anything by allowing laws into this country that would be devastating to domestic industry. This is the checking mechanism that was removed that had protected us from this contradiction to what our Congress is supposed to be doing. When they take their oath, they're supposed to be acting in the best interest of the American people. Well, they've loopholed this because they're saying, well, their constituents are American international corporations, and they're abiding by their oath of office, and they're not, because their oath of office covers all of American industries, not just the international ones. And this has placed us all in jeopardy. Unemployment may have gone down, but that's because more people are losing their unemployment benefits. Going into springtime, many of the seasonal businesses go back to work, and anybody who loses their unemployment benefits and can't find a job now moves to welfare. And welfare, as the statistics for welfare and the statistics for unemployment are two different categories. They don't commingle them together. If they took all of the people who are on welfare and all of the people who are on unemployment and made that a statistics, the rate of unemployment would go much higher than what they're reporting. Well, we're going to take a little break now, and because Cliff is telling me we got a commercial that's going to be coming up. So enjoy for the next couple of minutes. And my web page is being advertised. There's a book up there for federal referendum, which is a way of resolving the breaches in the Constitution that have been created since the ratification of the 14th Amendment. It gives us a way to be able to confront some of the legislative processes that were created that are not written into the text of the Constitution. So those are some of the issues that need to be addressed, especially on how to resolve some of our problems. If you're watching the program and you'd like to call, I'd like to get into a conversation with somebody who's out there right now. So feel free to call in about the subject. We could talk about another subject if you like to. Unless, well, I guess we'll talk more about NAFTA. What NAFTA has done has really hurt the American economy for the reason that it is placing the choices in the hands of domestic industries that have to make the choice of either they become part of NAFTA and cut their workforce here in America and start establishing warehouses, manufacturing companies, assembly companies outside of U.S. borders, is placing us in a position right now to where we are vulnerable because we're increasing our debt. We're accepting agreements that are even worse than the NAFTA agreement because the Transpacific Partnership is going to do even worse to us, to our economy, than what NAFTA has done, because it's bringing about 7 or 8 new countries into the deal, and China is trying to get into the deal, and Brazil is trying to get into the deal, and some of these countries are the biggest violators of copyright and patent laws, which brings up the awarding of military aircraft to Brazil. It's hard to figure out what's on this president's mind. I mean, if you were given a contract to a foreign nation to build military aircraft, don't you have to give them the classified and top secret information that goes along with the building of those planes? I mean, how are we going to guarantee that the Brazilian government or somebody within the manufacturing company itself isn't going to sell American secrets to another nation? Doesn't have to be China or Russia. It can be Colombia. It can be Mexico. It could be Korea. It could be North Korea. What we need to do is we need to assure that our national security is protected. I mean, you look at the things that Congress are classifying as national security that they feel is a threat to our nation, and then you compare it to the things that they're allowing to go out of this country. Trade secrets are being negotiated away by corporations because it was determined in the 1990s that copyrights and patents are not the property of the people, it's the property of the government. And the government is allowing these corporations to basically franchise out their logos along with the copyrights and the patents of their product. So when you see a product come in and it's an American product, it's being built or assembled by a foreign country, by foreign labor, and the American corporations here in the United States are just making their money off of what's happening outside of the United States. And a lot of it has to do with the environmental laws that have been instituted here in this country that are coming by way of foreign government. The NAFTA It threatens our relationships with both Mexico and Canada because, first of all, it has effects on the economies of all of these countries, to where the money is not actually being shared with the people. It's going to the government, but it's also going, staying within those industries and staying within the government. In Canada, for instance, is trying to enforce, America is trying to enforce in Canada laws that are on our books against citizens in Canada who have perpetrated no kind of criminal offense in the country that they live, but because here in America, our U.S. attorneys determined that what they were doing in Canada is illegal here in the United States because they're shipping things across the United States. We want Canada to extradite these people to us so we can prosecute them when Canada feels that there's no reason for that to happen. And these are some of the things that we had written into our grievances, into the Declaration of Independence, and now we're the administrators of these oppressive legislations. And our government threatens a friendly nation with economic sanctions if they don't abide by it. It's the same thing that's happening down in Mexico and other nations. The IMF, the World Bank Group. If a country, an undeveloped country, wants to borrow money and wants to develop its country, it has to abide by the rules and the regulations that are made by the United Nations and the IMF and the World Bank Group. And if they don't, then they don't get the loan. This is a strong arm tactic that has been used by the United Nations. It has been used by the IMF and the World Bank, who are subordinate organizations to the United Nations, since 1966. In fact, the United Nations has actually been involved in more disruptions, cultural disruptions, with its Transmigration 5 policy that started in 1975. These organized exodus of people who are maybe starving and suffering in one country are told by the United Nations and groups that work directly under them that if they go to this the borders of this one country, they have a camp set up for them, and they can get food and water and a chance at a better life. And these people cross the country with hundreds, perhaps thousands, dying on the way. And when they get to these borders, the countries that are there will let some of them in, but they get overrun by these transient populations, and it gets to the point to where they have these cultural crises, and then the UN uses that as an excuse to send in military forces. Many of the things that has happened in this country have come from the 14th Amendment. One of the things that the 14th Amendment has extended has been the actual jurisdiction of the President of the United States, along with his use of executive order. And the misuse of executive order, which right now I think the President has 923 and counting executive orders since his first term as president. this abuse in the use of executive order and in combination with the new extended jurisdiction in its use, because prior to the 14th Amendment, the President of the United States, with the exception of an emergency, a national emergency, had no ability to be able to execute an executive order against state governments. This is something that was always considered after the 14th Amendment as being a discretional authority, but also one that required a restraint of a president to use. In other words, if it wasn't for something that was a national emergency or something that was considered of time of the essence and couldn't go through Congress, they still notified Congress and told them what they were doing. They didn't just go ahead and say, well, you know, Congress, you aren't going to agree with me, so I'm going to do it anyway. You know, the heck with the Constitution. This also is a national security risk, because if we have a president, and some of us think that we do have a president, that has succumbed to foreign influence, who has denounced the United States of America on foreign territory. In his 2010 speech, I believe it was, when he was in France, he said that the world could no longer depend upon the American people or the American government to figure out the problems of the world. That has to be the most degrading thing that any president has ever said against any against the American people since the inception of our country. So we have to address these issues. And one of the issues that needs to be addressed is the 14th Amendment and its open-endedness. And the way to rectify the open-endedness of the 14th Amendment is to add to it the countermeasures that should have been added to it right from the beginning, that place a limitation and constraint upon the use of executive order, that put a limitation and constraint upon the use of emergency session of Congress, because that is another loophole that the federal government has used on many occasions. They used it in the midterm election, in the lame duck session in December, when everybody was out on vacation. Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid got up there smiling so hard it looked like they were going to break their face, to put it bluntly, and declared that the fat butts of the 13-year-olds were a national security issue, so that they can administer a $4.5 billion, I think, I might be wrong, billion, it might be million, but it was a grant given to the food processing companies for research and development of a menu so that those kids wouldn't be overweight, because the issue was that they were being rejected from military service because they were overweight. Well, my suggestion was to invest into having a teacher do what we did when we were kids, and stand out there in the schoolyard and have a time watch and make us run back and forth for, you know, 2 or 3 minutes and burn off some of those calories, rather than spending $4.5 million to create a menu, and that's not including the food. When we were in a recession, when we are trying to cut back spending, so now they push the issue of spending into a whole different category. Now they have to cut projects that we probably could have allowed to exist, because they were paying the people who gave them campaign funds during the midterm election. They were using public money to pay them back for the loan. And this is something that happens with both parties. Both parties do it. We got a $500 million royalty from the natural gas operations north of here, and the governor put it right back into maintaining the roads. Sounds like a great thing to do, but that $500 million belongs to all of the people here in the state of Pennsylvania, not just those people in that area. In fact, the corporations in that area should have been having to pay for the maintenance of the road as a separate part of the contract. And the royalties should have been used for something else. So basically what he did was the royalties, the $500 million, he gave it right back to the companies that paid that royalty to the people of Pennsylvania. It's a way of getting reelected. It was the same thing with the deal that the governor has done with the lottery. It's to appease the people on Social Security. And they keep on doing this. Now they want to raise the taxes on the wholesale part of the gasoline. And we all know that if you raise the price of wholesale on the gasoline companies are going to raise the prices at the pumps. So he might as well just go ahead and raise the prices directly to the sale of gasoline at the pump. I mean, one way or another, we're going to have to pay for it. This is a way of assuring that he's going to have the government unions support him in his re-election campaign. These are the things that have to stop. I mean, especially when he goes beyond the jurisdiction of his office and negotiates a deal with a foreign enterprise. And what surprised me most were the Republicans when the state's attorney general had confronted the issue that the Republican Party, the members of the Republican Party, just ho-hummed it. And were like, yeah, well, it was underhanded and we didn't like the way he went about it, but it's going to benefit the people on Social Security and retirement. There is no compromise when it comes to protecting the United States Constitution. And party agenda and party loyalty comes second. In fact, in my opinion, party loyalty doesn't even rate when any decision is being made in a law that is obviously in violation of the United States and the state constitutions. So these are some of our issues. Now, I have a book that I have just released. It's called The First Constitutions of the Original 13 States. What it's about, it covers a lot of issues in regards to the separation of church and state, because in many of these constitutions, the standards that ended state church are explicitly in detail in their Declaration of Rights. This was the primary reason why I had compiled this book, because when I first thought about the idea of compiling all of the first constitutions of the states together, I was thinking, you know, make one of those coffee table books and stuff, and decorating it up and putting it out there. But after I did all of the artwork and did all of the compiling, I realized that a book like that would probably cost about $200–300 to buy, and in a bad economy, It just wasn't the appropriate time. So I went ahead and I put it into a book form. I added 4 articles that I had previously published in other magazines and newspapers about the Constitution and about the formation and the debates about the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, which actually they wrote here in York. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that. But also there's some articles in there about the participation of the Liberty Riders and the Sons of Liberty organization and some of the things that they did during the Revolutionary War. And so I added all these things. So there's some entertainment in there, and there's also the documents that establish the separation of church and state. And it shows that the United States Bill of Rights is not actually the proper argument for the separation of church from state. Because by the time the United States Bill of Rights was ratified in 1791, the institution of state church was already eradicated here in this country. So why would you want to argue the separation of church and state based upon the federal Constitution? The federal Constitution was created as an agreement that established a common union of trade and commerce. They were establishing an organization that would represent the state governments in international trade and commerce. So it actually has no relevance whatsoever in any argument about freedom of speech or freedom of religious worship, because it was never expected or intended to have that jurisdiction. This is the reason why it's necessary to ensure that the proper documents are put out there, and that we do not rely upon modern historians, which are more propagandists than they are historians. Read the documents for yourself. Like, for instance, the Dred Scott case. For years, when they taught us in school about the Dred Scott case and the Taney decision that established that slavery was constitutional in this country. Well, when I read the actual the court transcripts, that is probably the furthest from the truth, because the Taney court threw the entire case out of the court, but had overturned two legislations. One of them was the Compromise of 1820, and the other was a section in the Compromise of, I believe it was 1856, the Missouri Compromise, I believe it was called. These were declared as being unconstitutional because they were federal laws that were being mandated against the states, and the federal government had no jurisdiction whatsoever against the state governments, except in the listed authorities in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And that's the reason why they were declared as being unconstitutional. So when you read the actual documents, you realize that who declared slavery as being constitutional in this country because of the Taney verdict was actually the slave owners and the slave traders. because that was the decision that they wanted, and it was a no decision. He didn't decide in favor of slavery or against slavery. He just issued the statement that it was a state issue and was not within the jurisdiction of the federal government, and that the lower court had actually made a wrong decision in referring it to the federal court because the federal court had no jurisdiction in that matter. Also, with the Plessy versus Ferguson judgment, this was how the 14th Amendment and what they referred to as the New Living Constitution had actually created a worse situation than the original concept of the Constitution, which gave the federal courts and the federal government no jurisdiction within the states. Because that was a state issue that was contained to the state of Louisiana, but because the 14th Amendment now gave a federal jurisdiction to this decision, it was now a national law, and we got national segregation. The 14th Amendment allowed a lot of travesties of law to be placed into this government, especially the 16th Amendment. 16th Amendment, or the amendment that was never supposed to be, or the soak the rich amendment, or the amendment that does absolutely nothing but confuse people, was a end run scheme that failed. And it was initiated by the Republican Party. So was the 14th Amendment, was initiated by the Republican Party, which is the reason why I caution people with the terminology of progressive as being something that is directed towards the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party is the progressive party, but there are a number of progressives in the Republican Party as well. The only thing that separates the two is the perspective. The socialist, nationalist perspective of the Democrat Party of progressives, and then you have the commercial nationalist perspective of the progressives in the Republican Party. Because progressivism began with the Republican Party, not the Democrat Party. So we're coming down to our last few minutes here on our show, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the No Affiliation Alliance. And the No Affiliation Alliance is a voters activist group that is promoting the registration of no affiliation. And no affiliation voter is an independent voting group that is not a party. The no affiliation is recognized as being Democrat Republicans with no party agenda. And we should have a right to vote in the primary election. And we're not going to wait until the primary election to make our beef that we should be treated as equals in our own party. And the intellectual law or the requirement by the Democrat and Republican parties and the state government of Pennsylvania that is keeping us from being able to vote in the primary elections is not constitutional. Because other intellectual laws have been outlawed by the federal government, especially by the 1964 Voters' Right Act signed by President Johnson, that outlawed these intellectual requirements, such as the ability to read or write. If I decide that the Republican Party is not representing me and the Democratic Party is not representing me, I have the right to withdraw from the main party agenda with my protest as no affiliation.
This has been Lexington Green Television with your host, Robert Marcoccio. Be sure to join us on the internet at www.marcocommunications.com. Join us each week at the same time and same place.